All right, let's get into it. You know, we usually picture investors as these lone wolves, right? Each one making their own individual bets. But when you're trying to tackle the biggest problems in the world, that's just not going to cut it anymore. Something's changed. Investors are realizing that things like climate change, well, they're not just headlines, they're massive financial risks. So a whole new era of teamwork is here. And today, we're going to look at how these investors are moving past solo efforts to really drive change together.
So the playbook for this big shift, it comes from the PRI, or the Principles for Responsible Investment. It's basically an initiative run by investors that's created a roadmap for how to build a financial system that's actually sustainable. And we're going to zero in on two principles that are all about the incredible power of the group. But, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the rules, I want to show you what this actually looks like in action. We are talking about investor groups so big, so powerful, they can sway entire industries and even global policy. So let's see what power in numbers really means.
I mean, it's a serious question, isn't it? If you're a pension fund, even a huge one, can your choices alone really stop something like deforestation or reverse climate change? The answer, more and more, is a clear no. The problems are just way too big for any one person or firm to handle. And this is the answer. Climate Action 100 Plus is the perfect example. Kicked off back in 2017, it is literally the biggest team-up of investors ever. You've got hundreds of them, managing tens of trillions of dollars, all speaking with a single voice to the world's biggest corporate polluters. Now that is a conversation a company cannot afford to ignore. And it doesn't stop there, not by a long shot. Look at the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance. This is a massive group of the world's biggest pension funds and insurance companies, and they've all pledged to get their entire investment portfolios to net zero by 2050. This isn't about nudging one company. This is about redesigning the entire economy from the top down. So why the huge rush to team up all of a sudden? What's the big, scary threat that makes this level of coordination an absolute must? Well, it turns out it's a kind of risk that totally breaks the old rules of investing. Now, the really key part of this slide is that last bit. Cannot be hedged through diversification. For decades, the answer to risk was simple. Spread your bets around. But with a system-level risk, like a full-blown global climate crisis, there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. If the whole system goes wobbly, every single thing in your portfolio is at risk. And nature gives us a perfect, if scary, example of this. Think about it. If one company loses its water source, that's a problem for that one company. But what if the whole ecosystem that provides that water collapses? Well, that's a systemic risk. The source material says it perfectly. It's a breakdown of the entire system where one loss triggers a chain of others. That's the wildfire these big coalitions are trying to prevent. Okay, so you've got this system-wide threat. It makes sense you'd need a system-wide game plan to fight it. And that's exactly where the PRI's Principles for Teamwork come in. They lay out the how for this whole new way of working together. So here's the crucial part. It's a two-step move. Principle 4 is all about spreading the word, getting more and more investors to buy in and sign on. You got to build the team first. Then, Principle 5 is all about action, working with that team to put the principles to work way more effectively than you ever could on your own. So promote the idea, then collaborate to make it happen. All right, so they've got the principles, the big ideas, but what does working together actually look like on a Tuesday afternoon? What are the practical tools in their toolkit that actually turn these ideas into real-world change? At its heart, this is what it's all about. This isn't about giving up on your own goals. It's about finding a smarter, more powerful way to achieve them. By pooling their resources, we're talking research, expertise, shareholder influence, investors can suddenly punch way, way above their individual weight. And here's a look at that toolkit. And you'll see it's so much bigger than just a bunch of investors calling up a CEO. They're talking to policymakers to change the actual laws, working with standard setters to rewrite the reporting rules, and engaging with entire industry groups to shift how a whole sector operates. They're trying to influence the entire ecosystem. Let's just zoom in on policy engagement for a second because it is one of the most powerful tools they have. I mean, why spend years trying to convince hundreds of different companies to adopt a new climate standard when you could work with regulators to just make it mandatory for everyone? It's about changing the fundamental rules of the game for the entire market. So, as we start to pull this all together, what we're seeing is a really profound shift. The financial world is starting to see its role differently.
It's moving away from this narrow focus on just individual stocks and bonds and toward a much bigger responsibility for the health of the entire system we all depend on.
This line from the PRI just nails the ultimate goal. Every single collaborative project, every policy letter that gets signed, every new investor that joins one of these alliances, it's all bricks in a wall, building toward this one single objective, a global financial system that is sustainable by its very design. And that really brings us to the key takeaway, the one thing to remember from all of this. Yes, individual action is good, it's important. But as we've seen today, it's collective action that is truly transformational. That's what it's going to take to solve these huge systemic challenges.
And that just leaves us with a really fascinating question, doesn't it? They've started with climate, now they're taking on biodiversity loss and human rights. If the most powerful financial players on Earth keep getting better and better at working as a team, what other huge, seemingly impossible problem might they decide to tackle next?